it's EJ, one of the co-hosts here at Behind the Mask, and Lori and T are joining me today. This is the Masks of Food. Just a heads up, this may be a triggering topic for some, so listen or watch with discretion. Just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals.
So we've got a heavy topic today, literally and figuratively. We want to talk about what it means to understand and have a relationship with food. Food is so much more than simply a means of survival. Understanding food helps us grasp attitudes, practices, rituals surrounding food, and it sheds light on our beliefs regarding ourselves and others. Without a strong, healthy grasp of food culture, food can become something that we manipulate. It stops being something that we respect, but rather something that we aim to control. And then the more we try to control it, the less we truly value it or enjoy the experience of it. And I know this to personally be true in my life. Food for me definitely became a weapon, a way to gain control, a way to run away. There were so many things. Food became this odd obsession that I never identified and never wanted to talk about and never really recognized in any form or fashion. We've all heard about anorexia and bulimia. In the last few decades, we've gotten into emotional eating, dysmorphia, there are other forms, very complex forms of eating disorders. We're not gonna tackle all of that today in this podcast. First of all, it's not even possible. And it's a very large subject matter. One that we would hope that you would definitely seek some professional help with if you feel like you or someone that you love is engaging in those behaviors. And so, but what we do want to do, and I do want to mention, we will have the links. We've got some hotline numbers and some things for you if you need them at the end. Go down into our link section, and that'll all be there for you. They're very important topics, but we want to hit just a little more surfacey and just a little more maybe close to home for everyone, because food and a healthy relationship with food or not is something that we all deal with to some degree. I don't know about you. When I grew up, and even when I was a young waitress, I would encourage my children that were sat at my table to be a member of the Clean Plate Club. I was always told that you need to finish, you need to be appreciative and eat everything placed in front of you. Don't complain about food. There were so many rules and things. And then, I have shared in other aspects on the podcast that, for myself and my family, I felt that there was always a constant need to look like we jumped off the cover of Time magazine. The way we dressed, the way we spoke, the way we ate, every piece of silverware, how you held your glass, everything that we did was identified, macro, observed, and broken down so that it could be perfect, or as close to perfect as we could get it.
Right.
And so I didn't even realize how obsessive that, this just outside perception could be, and especially regarding food. So,
Which,
what about you, ladies?
well, and it's good. I'm glad you mentioned that word, because we talked a little bit about that last week, our last episode about perceptions and how we see things. And you and I have had lengthy discussions over food and regarding that, especially when I moved in this most recent time, because when we first moved in, we were both kind of doing our own thing. But, you had started going through your mindfulness training, and I just thought it was a joke. And even now, and I've come a long way in that. But I still think back, and I don't think I ever had an unhealthy obsession with food. And I know I've talked in the podcast with eating being like, I think it was more because some of my weight is coming from some of the diseases that I have, the polycystic ovarian syndrome and the PMDD and some different things like that. So that's a hormonal thing. So it impacts that. And so had I learned at a younger age more about what was better for me because of the diseases that I have, that I would have been more mindful at the time of what I should be eating versus what I should be staying away from, or like limiting. So I feel like, I'm coming a long way now and getting back to some of that I've kind of slipped up on in the last couple years. But food it's unfortunate, but then it's fortunate because it's something we have to do. We have to eat. We can't just not eat. Food is fuel for our body. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who don't know the desires, the needs, of everybody, because everybody's different and we all have our own things, just like my diseases. And Lori has her own impacts with food, Tina as well. And so we kind of go to this, yeah, we can have a general discussion about it. And I'm sure these are topics we'll come back to in the future, but I think today is really important that we start talking just about food in general. And I grew up, you're right, clean plate club. Like if I put it on my plate, I was to eat it. If my parents served it to me, I was allowed to just take a bite and then not eat it if I didn't like it or something. And
Yeah, the no thank you bite.
Yeah, exactly. So just, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough topic, but I don't know. I feel like it's gonna be an easier topic for me just because I don't see myself as having impacted by food in that way, even though I eat when I'm bored and I eat when I'm, around that time of the month and I'm craving chocolate like you wouldn't believe, like right now. So I do have, issues with food. But this week I was like, okay, I can't be eating chocolate every 5 minutes when I'm craving sweets. So what can I do? And so I got some trail mix that has a little bit of sweet in it, but it's good for me. And so it's like making those mindful choices. So you're not, and I'm sure I'll talk a little bit through here too of things I've learned through talking with my nutritionist. And yeah, so I don't know. I feel like it's a good topic and I'm glad we're not going to dive in too far because I feel like I would want to do the topic justice, and I don't feel like we could really tackle it without having another professional here. Not that T's doesn't have the skills, but I know she deals a lot with family trauma and that. So I would want an actual nutritionist or somebody who's been in maybe deals with psychologists or patients who have dealt with food related illnesses, I guess, because they're not really just a disorder that can change. We always have that stuff.
Kind of like
yeah,
being an alcoholic. All right, T, give us some wisdom or share with us a little bit.
So the first thing that I want to bring up and that we've sort of touched on is that our bodies need food. one of the things that we're taught in mental health when we're doing, as counselors and therapists and psychologists and whatnot, is before we can even get to any sort of therapeutic work, we need to address clients' barriers to services. And one of those barriers is, does your client have a safe place to sleep? Do they have the clothes they need? Do they have food? So that takes me to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And most people have some familiarity with it. I don't have all of the layers memorized, but what I do know is that the very base of our needs is food, safety, which includes, do you have a safe place to sleep, etc. But that food, absolutely, we have to have food, and preferably healthy food to fuel our bodies. And if our clients don't have that, then we can't even go to the next step at all, because we have to help them find that. So there is that. There's also the fact, another thing that we sort of brushed up against so far, is the addictive factor. So food does have an addictive factor, especially our modern day present prepackaged foods. They appeal to our reward pathway, which is what addiction is part of. I don't have all of that information, so EJ, I'm really appreciative that you acknowledged that this is not an area that I specialize in. So, but I am aware of, because it does affect my clients, is that reward pathway, and it's a part in our brain that gets rewarded. We feel that sense of reward and satisfaction and feel good feelings when it's activated, and food activates it as much as drugs do, and so does and other addictive behaviors like gambling. That's why they're addictive, is because we're seeking that feeling again. So that being said, that does make this topic pretty complicated, because I mean, just the basics of it, we have to have food, and food makes us feel good.
Right.
So there definitely ends up being a relationship with it at some point.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember my dad having this phrase, like eat to live or live to eat.
Yes.
I think us in America, we eat, we live to eat. And in a lot of countries, they, eat to live, because they are lacking the resources to have a healthy meal. So they eat what they can eat when they can eat it. And so that's something here in America, I think we often take for granted, that we have the resources here. And you mentioned too about making sure people have healthy food access. And that's why a lot of food programs, WIC and some of those, are limiting to certain items, because they don't want somebody to go and spend all their money on chocolate cake and cookies, because that's not healthy. Those are not what your body needs to sustain life. We can do without cookies, we can do without sweets, but we can't do without protein and fiber and specific calories, healthy calories, healthy fats.
Remember, we were driving past that fruit stand the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, because fruit stands now are accepting food carts. They have a way to do that, and I think that's so great for those families and those children. And I love that we've been able to allow the local producer of those goods to be able to get it to those who really need it.
Right.
So I'm excited about that. And I know that's just happened in the last few years. So I really wanted to I really want to look at a list that I found, because I think that I mentioned it earlier. I think that more people than know have some issue with food, and they just haven't identified it, right? It's back there in the peripheral, if you will, and they don't even realize it. And I found this list of 11 things that will help you understand that you might have an unhealthy relationship with food. So, number one, is there shame or guilt regarding what and how often that you eat. I really want that to sink in for just a minute. Do you hide it? Do you curtail it? Do you make sure that you eat it really fast? Do you, or, are there limits? Are there anything in there? And then do any of those things lead to some form of shame or guilt? Number two, are there foods that are off limits? Because there shouldn't be. We're not supposed to have limits.
Well, I will say, I agree to that, but the caveat is there's maybe a medical reason why you have to stay away from it. Like me, I can't have orange juice because I don't have a gallbladder, but
Okay.
that's right. But I get it. I get what you're saying. It's like, there's a caveat to that.
Of course, we all have allergies. We have medical conditions. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right. No, I get you.
Not in any form or fashion am I talking about that. I'm talking about, all the other stuff, limiting
Mhm.
your carbs and limiting this and limiting that and eliminating an entire food group.
Yeah.
My nutritionist has been very, very, and I know yours too, EJ,
Mhm.
very, very specific in saying
Yep.
everything can be used and
Right.
nothing is to be eliminated. Yes, you can eat more protein than you eat
Mhm.
of sugar and fat, but yeah. So
Mhm.
number three, overeating without realizing it. Do you mindlessly not think about it, and next thing you know, that entire bag of chips is gone, or the whatever it is that is your thing. Number four, eating when you aren't hungry, which is kind of associated with number three.
I
But do
always
you
call
find
that one eating
yourself
when you're bored.
eating when you're bored, you just eat because you're eating, you know? Number five, hit really close to home for me. Are you eating in response to emotions?
Mhm.
When I began this healthy journey that I was on, I had to start keeping an emotion journal right along with my food journal. And wow, did they correlate, Number six, do calories and macros, some people don't even know what those mean, determine your choices of how good your diet is? Wow. Number seven, numerous diets without success should be a red flag. Number eight, do your food choices determine the quality of your day?
It's a good one.
Wow. Yeah, right. Number nine, are your food choices considered a reflection of who you are? Number 10, do you avoid eating around others? And lastly, when it comes to food, is there an elevation of anxiety or stress before events where food will be served? That was a pretty eye-opening list there. Tia, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've worked with clients on in the past is the fact that food is often linked to power and control. And so a way to approach it is mindfulness. And so that's just, there was the comment about eating a bag of chips without realizing it. One of the things that I've done with clients is say, don't stop eating the chips. Eat the chips, but eat it one at a time, being aware of everything about the bite in that chip, what it tastes like, what it feels like, everything. And you might find that you're satisfied a lot sooner, because that mindless eating is actually something that all of us can get caught up in. And then, yeah, we find, back in the day for me, it was a bag of cookies would be gone just like that, because I wouldn't think about it. The other area is, for me, that touches base is the fact that, keep losing my thought on that part of it. But I know this about myself. I'm a reactive person. So if you tell me I can't have it, I want it. If I can sneak to get it, I want it more. If I have to sneak to get it. And so it's that I'm not supposed to have this. So now I'm going to have it. And so, and that's just a part of how my personality is set up. So I have to be aware of that, because I literally will cut off my nose to spite my face if you tell me I can't. So, yeah.
I think some of us have that little bit of inner rebel in us.
Yeah. I'm a very, but people don't realize that about me because I don't present that way. But yeah, if I have to sneak it to get it, I want it more. And so there's this sense of self-awareness, and that's what that list is really great. It's kind of opening up that self-awareness. Where do you fit along those lines? And even if you identify with those, it doesn't mean you're doing everything wrong or anything like that. You have to be really careful about that. But if some of those kind of like hit home and like, yeah, I can see that. Well, now you know where to focus. Now you know what you need to know.
And we'll put the link in there so you can go back to that list.
I also want to touch on the shame part. That really spoke to me, and that's probably because it's my in my doing working with clients is I deal with a lot of I help people with a lot of shame and blame and guilt and stuff like that. And those are the things that I see the most often as halting a person in their healing process, is that sense of shame. And so if that's an area that, as you were listening to that list and it kind of spoke to you, I would really encourage you to find someone to talk to you, because that shame can affect so many areas of your life, not just food.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
EJ, did you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot. I should have wrote down the few that really connected me. Obviously, I made a little gesture when you two were talking about the eating and just not realizing you finished off the whole bag of chips or something. And I remember doing that. I mean, I think everybody has been, I would say guilty of doing that at some point. But the why comes up a lot. And I don't know, food has been an interesting one, because I know growing up, we had, you have your dessert, but you don't have it every night. So it's a special treat. So I know, and then even recently, like there's been times like I want to treat myself, and you're like, okay, yeah, but is that treating yourself with the right thing? And so you've questioned, not in a way of like judging me, but just asking, like, can you be mindful about what you're eating? And we've also had discussions. Like I've worked with my nutritionist. I worked with her for pretty consistently for about 1.5 years. And I lost about 50 pounds doing that. And a lot of it was just cutting back and being mindful of what I was putting in, and still treating myself here and there, having a donut once in a while, having a muffin, having some cookies, doing some ice cream. And yes, those are things I enjoy, but I also learned a lot about yeast and how that impacts like your desire for food. And how your gut plays a big part in like what signals sends to your body. And like if you eat more sweets and sugary items, that sugar, even though it turns, we talk about it's a carb, it goes into your body, it turns into carbs. Well, it also causes yeast in your gut, and if you have too much of it, it can send a signal like, oh, I have some, now we want more. Because you just like yeast making bread, that yeast that you feed it with is sugar to bloom and make it more. So you have that yeast that starts to build up in your gut, and then that yeast sends a signal to your brain that says, we want more. So then that's where those cravings sometimes come from so that's when you have to know, like, okay, if you're having a craving, where it is. And that's why I really appreciated my nutritionist, because she was able to kind of nail down a lot of that and help me, because I had to log my food, and she was able to say, okay, well, this wasn't the greatest idea, but let's try this next time. And that was tough, writing and logging my food. And I really appreciated recently my trainer. He made a comment. He's like, what are the first 3 letters in diet? And I was like, die? And he goes, exactly. He's like, he's like, any diet you start on, it's gonna die before you even get started, because that's the whole point of it is, and it's a lifestyle change. It's not I'm dieting, because there's such a negative connotation with diet, that word.
With
And
dying, yeah.
well, yeah, I mean, just in general, like die, but I look at it more as the diet itself is dying. You're not going to have success going into it if you're forcing yourself to believe, oh, I'm on a diet. Which is why, again, my nutritionist helped, and she's like, you can have all that stuff with limitations and counting what you're doing. And not to say, like, I had a food scale sitting next to me and, I was like, okay, I can't have more than this, because that's also part of other things. Some of the food,
Sessions.
yeah, that. So yeah, I enjoy talking about food, and I love to cook. And Lori and I just had a thing recently where I was like, I'm going to do this. And I made something, and she just about killed me for doing it. And because her and I have different perspectives, different obsessions, yeah, like different fears with food. And I was like, well, wow, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you struggle. And but we talked about it, we talked through it, and we dealt with it. And I will say that whenever I was trying to quote unquote diet or be on a weight loss program of some kind, my parents, when I was living with them, never followed it. So I would struggle living in a home where 2 other people didn't follow that. So then my mom would still make the same meal she did all the time. And it made it very hard to be successful in those weight losses unless I was really diligent and just not ate anything they ate. And now, even as Lori and I live together, we both are more on the same track with our weight loss, wanting to eat the right things. But even so, there's things I add in that Lori chooses not to, because she'd rather have that from something else. So, we still have those struggles, and living with someone who isn't necessarily on the same track is challenging. Lori and I have definitely noticed that in the last 6 months or so since we've lived together again, that it is challenging, even though, and my nutritionist was even concerned when I first said that I was moving in with someone. She's like, is this person going to be healthy, food wise for you? Are you going to be going into a situation where there's sweets and candy? And that's when I told her about Lori's health and what she has done, and why she was really happy to hear that I was going to a household where there wasn't going to be that impact around, I guess. So yeah, I could say more, but I don't want to take up all the time.
So some things that I'm hearing even in all of our speech, and I have my counselor's voice in my
I
head.
was just thinking that.
So I'm hoping that all of us, even in this current podcast that we're doing, can really work on eliminating have to, limits those negative words that go along with all of this. We don't have to keep a journal. We don't have to follow a specific plan. We don't have to do anything, but we can, and we can choose to, and we can still find joy.
Yeah.
I think, EJ, you brought up the incident that happened a couple weekends back. one of the things, well, there were several things before I had bariatric surgery, working with nutritionists and nurses and all that, trying to get ready for, this major change that I was going to be making in my life, physically, mentally, emotionally. And so a couple of things. If I think about it before we post this podcast, I'm going to re-find the article on diet soda. It's so horrible for you. And T, you had mentioned, about the processed and all these things, the convenience, and now none of that is really set up for us to, it's not healthy, and it doesn't help us in any of our goals. It just kind of maintains, it gets you by or gives you that quick fix if that's what you're needing.
Right.
But I was surprised, and my oldest son and one of his besties, while he was in the Corps, really worked on me. He was going to be a trainer, and he used to call me mom, and he said, "Mom, if you could give up one thing, it would be the best thing that you could ever give up," he said, "is all that diet soda that you drink." He said, "Because you don't even realize it, but it's actually triggering you to want more, to have these cravings." And he said, "It's so bad for your body."
Right.
And I would say it's the best. It was one of the hardest, but it is the absolute best thing I ever gave up, is the diet soda. The nutritionist, my bariatric nurse, really, really counseled me on the importance of not drinking my calories. Mostly because, as a bariatric patient, we only have so much room in that little tiny sleeve that they created. And
Mhm.
she's like, "I'd rather you didn't fill it up with calories that quickly flow through and give you nothing." And so I learned the importance of not, for special occasions, for different things. And when I go out, I'll have a glass of lemonade or a glass of wine or something like that. But it is not something that I engage in on a daily basis, because I want what little space that I have in my sleeve to be filled with the things that are going to nourish and love my body and help me. And that's the difference. I don't have to, but I can choose to love my body, be mindful, take care of it. And that's what I'm trying to engage in.
Mhm.
Because, as you mentioned, T, for me specifically, food was massively about control. Because of my trauma, because of my abuse, and you brought that up, it was one area I thought, well, at least I can control this, and then it became obsessive behavior. And I definitely, not now, thank goodness, there are a few of those areas, where I'm still, I'm constantly working. I am a work in progress. So back to the incident. My roommate, not thinking about it, just craving, and she loves to cook, and she specifically loves to bake. And she even announced what she was going to do. It wasn't like she didn't tell me. She's like, "I'm going to make peanut butter cookies." And in my head, I'm thinking, why are we making cookies? What, why? Okay. But I just pass it off, I'm like, just ignore it. Or and then they're baking. And they smell so good. I could not get that smell out of my house like the rest of the day. I was burning candles and opening windows trying to get, I was like, oh, this smell is gonna kill me. I didn't realize it would be I had no idea what a trigger that it was gonna be. And so, not knowing what I'm going through, because I'm just sitting over here suffering in silence, but I'm like getting more tense by the minute. She sits down across the table from me and engages in some activity. And I think her phone rang or something, So she's busy. She doesn't even look up at me, says, "Oh, by the way, they're done in the oven." And I'm thinking, now she wants me to go touch them. I have to go take them out of the. I had so much anger. I literally almost chucked the tray of cookies across the stove because I didn't want to be near them because I just wanted to inhale them and eat the entire tray. And I was like, where is that coming from? But I realized that purposefully, I have chosen not to have that stuff in my home because I knew it might trigger me or cause those things to go on in my brain, because kind of like for an alcoholic, it was like going to a bar. And I just was like, I don't know that I can handle this, So she then, by this point, because I'm banging around in the kitchen and not being happy, she's like, "Are you okay?" At first I had to say, wait, because I couldn't even talk about it. But then I came back later and I said, "Okay, here's where I'm at. Here's what's going on. Can we please not bake cookies in the house? Like, we have to buy them outside, eat them outside. That's fine. I just don't know that I can have them in my home," because it really felt like, for me, like an alcoholic would have responded to. But I had to identify that, and then I had to apologize for my crazy behavior. Not like I did it on purpose or
Right.
anything, but just that I felt bad because she didn't know, and she wasn't trying to cause me to stumble or anything. It just was a thing. And so here we had this
Right.
crazy roommate
Because
situation. And
for the average person, the smell of baked goods in their kitchen is amazing. That's why they make those particular scents, like birthday cake scent and vanilla
Oh,
cookie
yeah.
scent and
Mhm.
stuff like that, because most of us
Yeah.
associate it with good feelings.
And I do too. I love to
I
bake.
just couldn't control it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I love to bake. I love to cook. And we had happened to find a recipe that involved the cookies, but they were like, there's no flour in them. There's no something
The 3
else.
ingredient one.
Yeah. The egg, the sugar, and the peanut butter. And we had
Yep.
leftover peanut butter from the holidays that we'd made. And I was like, I'm going to make some, and not realizing it would cause World War III is what it felt like at the time. Cause I was just like, what the hell is wrong with her? Like, what? Not because I didn't know. She hadn't told me. And it was some time before she talked about it. And again,
I
that's
really
kind of
did
going
have to
along with what I
process it.
was, yeah, which again goes along with what I was talking about, how living with somebody is a challenge unless you guys are following the same exact thing. And for me, I don't struggle with that stuff as much as she does. And she has chosen to alleviate those items from her home. So it's something like, okay, if I buy something to partake in, I need to keep it in my room, or I need to keep it away from her because I don't want her to struggle, because I don't want to make her fall off the wagon either. And I think that was the fear with my nutritionist, was like, is this person going to be healthy or unhealthy in my, weight loss? And that's, once I assured her that, she's going to be healthy for me. Sometimes I think she's more healthy than I need, because and it's funny because there's certain things I will not compromise on. And I had to finally cave after 6 months and go buy something that I will not cave on, because I have been craving a sandwich, but I refuse to use the mayonnaise that she likes because I do not like the taste of it. And that and ketchup are the two things I will not get generic on. And she's had this oddball, like, it's a brand name, but it's like olive oil mayonnaise or something. And I cannot stand the taste. I just want to vomit whenever she uses it. And like, so finally the other day, I'm like, I am going to go buy the mayonnaise that I like, and I'm going to have a sandwich with that. And I'm sure she was like, why is she buying this? And we've had discussions because, as she said, being a bariatric patient, she has to limit how much she can put in. So she's choosing to put in healthier stuff. And there are certain things I will sway on and I will agree on, and I will say, oh yeah, let's have that instead of this. Mayonnaise and ketchup are the two things I will not.
So what's interesting about what you guys are talking about is actually another part of this topic, and that's the how as families we treat food, and that historically throughout time, that is where families got together, was around the table.
Yep.
And that's when so everything was about food. And there's jerks. There are jerks, but there are jokes
Yeah.
about how certain culture mothers,
Mhm.
that's how they show their love, is through food.
Right.
I don't think it's culturally specific. I think honestly that's the way a lot of us are as mothers or as caretakers. We take care of people through feeding them. Oh, you're feeling sad, you should eat. You're feeling
Right.
happy, oh, you should eat. And so there's a lot of that as a factor too. And then on top of that, when you live in a home where there's multiple people with different tastes and likes and dislikes and needs, and so trying to figure all that out, there's a lot of stuff that can create hangups around food.
Yeah. It can, and even I would even say go as far as to say like media has really impacted that too. How many networks now have food related like competition shows? Like, don't get me wrong, I love the Food Network, and I'll watch cooking shows till the cows come home. But
Mm.
I don't like the food competition shows. I don't. I can only handle so many of them, and there's so many. And like Lori's grandson was over recently, and we sat down, and he wanted to show us this show on Netflix, and it's something about snack. It's you take a snack and then you have to recreate it, and then like the second part of the competition is you have to do something inspired by that snack. So like the first one was like hot Cheetos. And I'm like, I sat and I watched an episode, but I'm like, yeah, this is not for me. I don't know. Because I see people do stupid things, and I'm just like, what the heck are you doing? Because I know how to cook, and that's not how you cook, But I don't like putting that stuff in. Like I don't even like a metaphorical feeding of that kind of stuff just doesn't appeal to me. And I was like, oh yeah, cool, nice show. Because I wanted to be encouraging to her grandson by watching it because he was all excited to show us. And I was like, okay, we don't have to watch this again, right? Like, yeah.
Or the shows where they the eating competitions, or the shows of the eating challenges,
Mhm.
going to a restaurant and eating the biggest
Yeah.
thing they have on their menu in a certain amount of time. And it's like, what are we encouraging here?
Right.
It's accessing that fun part of our brain
Mm-hmm.
that seeks out fun and pleasure.
Right.
Yes, yes. And I think um for me, with all of the issues that I had with food and whatever, one of the things that I was able to identify was that I had completely lost any joy or experiential pleasure in food. It was either a way to punish myself or to hurt myself
Right.
or to give into that inner demon, you know. And I definitely lost my ability to find joy and pleasure in food. And that is something that I'm definitely redefining. And I've noticed that some of my taste buds, are changing, and I will like something that I didn't like before. I was eating this little can of tuna the other day, and normally I literally would have not eaten it because it had the word lemon in it, because I've had some bad experiences in the past with too much lemon with fish. And I get that lemon goes with fish, but I've always felt that people kind of overdid it. And it was lemon and you were eating some fish with it. And I'd rather eat the fish and just eliminate the lemon, I guess. But I took a chance, I opened it up, and I've learned to slow down. I in my mindfulness. So T, you have a bestie that you went to school with, through your counseling program. And he helped me out with one of my first chronic illness groups. And something I had never done before, he took us through this mindfulness exercise where we took one thing and we put it in our mouth and we closed our eyes. So we held it in our hand and we talked about how it felt, and then we put it in our mouth, and then was it juicy, was it dry, was it crisp, was it this? And I don't think at the time, even then, I truly appreciated what he was doing for me. And as because I now have this limited stomach, this sleeve, I can really find joy in one bite. And I couldn't do that before, but I can now. And I can just mull it around and get every sensation out of that one bite. And it's very fulfilling. And I never knew that was possible before, but I do now. So yeah. I think that it is very, very important for us to not focus on the rules. Rather than rules, let's have some healthy guidelines. I think healthy guidelines is a better place for us to go. And we need to be flexible, and we need to not punish ourselves or beat ourselves up when we don't do it exactly
We
right.
should not use food as punishment or reward.
Exactly.
And we need to have more things that give us pleasure than just food.
Yeah.
We can take pleasure in food, but it should not be the only pleasure we experience. If it
No.
is, then that's where we'll go for that experience.
That's what I was trying to say the other day, Miss CJ, when I wasn't saying it correctly. That right there. It's not that it's a bad thing. We can have it, but it shouldn't be the only thing. And it definitely shouldn't be our first go-to.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then for me, like, I grew up in a household, my mom was a diabetic, so she had to keep candy bars in the freezer, so if God forbid her blood sugar got extremely low, she had something to eat, and those were tempting. I think I've eaten a Snickers bar solid frozen. That was interesting.
You still have
'cause
teeth.
I know. I'm like, my teeth are hurting for you.
And so there were things, and I know you talked about the diet soda. I'm grateful that I grew up in a household that didn't have sugared soda. My mom had me drinking diet soda from, when I was drinking soda. And I know that there's a lot of things that they say now, and I'm sure I can piece together the why. I haven't, aside from on the rare occasions where I need to drive a long distance and I, use some things for caffeine. I don't drink soda. Sometimes when I go to a restaurant, if I like in this area, the water tastes terrible. So I'll do anything to drink not that, but I do drink water as long as it's like extra filtered, which is weird because I never cared. I used to drink tap water in the other places, but here it's disgusting. And I didn't realize I was a water connoisseur or a water snob until I got here. And like, oh, this is not water. This is like tar. Like, it was disgusting. But yeah, so I've given up mostly soda. Like I'm on some medication where I really shouldn't have a lot of caffeine. So I do only use that when I'm taking longer trips. Like when we went, recently we went up and we drove to Leavenworth, a little small town. It's about 4 hours away. And so on going there and on our way back, I was drinking on, this time, instead of doing soda, I did just some protein drinks that had some energy boost in it. just to kind of keep me awake. Granted, Lori was with me, so she could keep me awake, but at some point her phone fell out of the car window, so that was fun. Yeah, that's for another podcast. That was an adventure. And yeah, so I don't know. I'm slowly transitioning things to make different choices, especially with my drinks. I know that I don't have to just drink water. And something too, and I want to throw this out there before we go on to the next topic. I was realizing that your doctor has a great way of testing for what you're lacking. They can do blood tests. They can see what vitamins you're weak in, what electrolytes you're low in. And then there's tons of lists online that you can say, like potassium. You can get great potassium from certain foods. You can get potassium from bananas. So if that's something you're lacking, that's something you can do. I know my dad always lacked potassium, so they encouraged him to have a banana a day. Recently, I found out that I'm lacking in chloride. And that's probably because I'm now drinking filtered water, which takes all that stuff out. And in the other areas I used to live, I drank the tap water, which had the fluoride and the chloride and all that in there, which is good for you to a limit. So if you feel like you're lacking something or you're constantly craving something, oftentimes your body's desiring that. So it's maybe a good time to check with your doctor and say, hey, like, I feel like I'm needing, vitamin C, and maybe you're low in it. So just, yeah, I encourage you to check in with your doctor, talk with it and communicate with them. And they can definitely help you kind of narrow down what you might be lacking. And also on the other end, what you might be allergic to or sensitive to that could impact what you can and can't eat. Like I've had to make the choice to stay away from certain acidic foods because since I had my gallbladder removed, I've had it bothers me. Like it really makes me sick when I eat or drink that. So, but let's shift to some positive things because I feel like we've been talking a lot of negative.
I was thinking the same thing. I want to start off really quick with something that I'm sure we've all heard before, but there's no magic pill.
Right.
There's no magic formula.
Yep.
There's no one size fits all when it comes to nutrition and healthy food culture and all the things that we're talking about. We are each unique and our bodies are extremely unique and they need different things they require. But the best thing that we can give our bodies outside of meeting the nutritional needs, emotionally and mentally, we can give our bodies grace and patience, and we can process and we can learn to be flexible. And I think that if we're doing those things and we're engaging in those behaviors when we're engaging with food, I think we're all of us more likely to have a healthier relationship with food.
Mhm.
So, T, any thoughts on that?
No, I think you hit it all. I think just, I guess maybe self-awareness, just who you are, how you are, and loving those things about yourself. And I think that just leads to some natural, healthy approaches.
Mhm.
And in the beginning, I really, we talked about the shame part of it. And I really, really encourage that if you find that you feel a lot of shame, to really look to see what you need to do to address that, because shame is not healthy. Shame is not an indication of growth. It's not an indication of being in a positive space. Shame is rarely warranted beyond, like, if you do something you're ashamed of, I think that's temporary. It's a temporary thing. Because shame continues beyond addressing a situation. It's no longer helpful. It's no longer useful. So moving out of that shameful area is really important, I think.
So you ladies know I love my lists, and I found another list. And I think it'll be a great way because we talk about having tools, you know. Um, One of the first things on the list was eliminating distractions, because our phones, our computers, all the things we now do while we're eating, while we we engage with a phone or a tablet or a watch or a something with almost everything we do now, which takes away from our ability to be more mindful and present in the moment that we're in. Um, and we've talked about this already, but all of us could benefit from stopping labeling good and bad, because
Yes.
judgment actually gives away your control. And it gives away our power. So,
Yeah, that's one that's usually a big deal in my book too, is stop labeling things.
yeah, stop
Or if you're
labeling things.
labeling it, check it out why. Redefine it.
Yes. And better sleep. I've been told this one a million times, but better sleep, God, sleep helps everything. But it really lessens our stress and helps our body, our ability to listen to our body.
Well,
Because then we
yeah, and
can be
your
more mindful.
right, and your body when you're sleeping does its most regeneration at that time.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
healing and regeneration.
Yeah. Um, Consider professional help or a support group, whichever might work for you. These are very powerful tools that you can use. Stop beating yourself up and make sure that you're eating enough, because when you get obsessive or whatever, we can go the extreme other way, and then we're not giving our body what it needs. So we need to be eating enough.
Yeah. I was talking with my nutritionist. It was probably one of the last sessions or one of the last few sessions I had with her. And she'd originally set my caloric intake to around 1800 because it's calculated kind of by your weight and by what you're already eating and stuff. And she's like, are you eating that? Are you struggling to get to the 18? Or are you struggling to, because you're constantly going over? And I'm like, I'm constantly going over and I don't feel like I'm getting enough. Like I'm constantly hungry. So she actually increased it. And I found in all my journaling that I was eating 3 to 4,000 calories a day. So having a 2,000 calorie diet is actually where I need to be right now. And that's for my weight. That's for what the other stuff in my body that I need. And, she explained how protein and fiber weigh less, or there's a certain thing, but like fats, more fats, way less, or don't quote me on this because it's just that there's a higher amount. So it's something to be mindful. Like if you eat a lot of high fatty foods, that more calories per gram of fat versus protein and fiber. So those are things you have to be mindful of. And that's what a nutrition is. And I'm a proponent of a nutritionist. I had never talked with one until a couple of years ago, and it changed my outlook on everything. And I highly recommend that. I think, and nutritionists and even some gym trainers have some experience in training in nutrition. So if you're not sure, like I find like if I have protein, like a high amount of protein, like in the morning, I'm not hungry the rest of the day. And that's what it's supposed to do. Protein is supposed to help you curb some of those cravings and the needs to eat or the hunger pains. And so I find that it helps me. It might not help you the same way, which is why we always give you that disclaimer at the beginning and at the end. Please talk with your other medical professionals, because we are not experts. We can just share what we've experienced and what people around us has experienced. And the cool thing is everybody's going to know their own body. Even your doctors are not going to know your own body. You have to tell them. And I know a lot of people, well, you have to do it this way or it's not going to happen. Like, no, that's not it. If you know your body, if you can't eat it, that's your choice. That's, there's certain things that Lori's like, well, that's something that's supposed to be really healthy. And I'm like, sorry, you can't eat it. Not going to try, because I have certain issues that I've addressed, and my doctor and I have figured out that like yogurt is supposed to be one of the most healthy things for you. I can't eat it because the hormones in it make me break out like I'm a teenager again.
For me, it's
Like,
fish.
Yeah.
fish is supposed to be so healthy, but I can't eat it, or very rarely can eat it, and only in small itty bitty amounts, not enough to be good for me. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And
so I think that we always like to go back to our faith. And I wanted to share a scripture that I found that I thought really summed up what we talked about today in a great way. It's from 1 Timothy 4, and it's verses 4 and 5. For everything God created is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving, because it is consecrated by the word of God and prayer. Which I think is an important, I mean, many of us who are, faithful choose to be grateful and say thank you before we partake in our meal. That's a huge part of that. And it helps our bodies receive that in a healthy way. And so I really felt like that scripture in particular, I was so happy when I found it. I'm like, yeah, this is kind of summing up what we're talking about today.
Right.
And I think the other big thing, remember you're an individual, but above all else, have some fun and try to have food experiences. Because it's not supposed to be clinical and dry and, simply sustaining of the body. It can be more than that
Right.
without being harmful.
Mhm. Yeah, I think food is definitely a huge topic. It's, as we've talked about, it basically it revolves around every event we ever have. That's the big piece, is food. And communicating to family and people you spend time with what you can and can't do, or you're choosing not to do, is a huge proponent of that. We had an event recently, and Lori, your son, had generously gone over and gotten you something to eat so you didn't have to walk, and he brought back, and it was a plate full of pasta, and you have chosen not to eat that because of your reasons why, and you're like, I can't eat any of that. And I think it's hard. And I even know when I was doing Weight Watchers years ago, I did have somebody, they did a class and they were talking about the BLTs, bites, licks, and tastes, and how even just those can add calories to your day. And it's kind of stuck with me all these years that, I have to be mindful. Like when you make a sandwich, you don't always have to lick off the spoon or the knife when you make your sandwich, or because that's just adding more calories into your day. And back then, Weight Watchers was very caloric focused. I don't worry about it too much now, but I do start to notice, like as I'm cooking and stuff, and I'm cutting up vegetables and I'm snacking on things as I'm going. And so it's really looking at what you're doing and not being afraid to talk about it, because I feel like it's a topic that a lot of people are afraid to talk about, or afraid to bring up, because they're afraid to make somebody struggle or upset them. Because it's a very fine line between calling somebody out on what they're eating and asking them, are you sure you really should eat this?
Or it's hard to talk about because you're afraid you're going to be judged.
Yeah, that too.
So one of the things you're kind of alluding to that I also experienced is quite a few years ago, long time ago, I decided to try this diet, and I can't remember what it was called, but the premise of it was kind of law of averages. And you compare, you averaged out your fat calories, not your calories, but your fat calories. And so if you had a cookie, eat an extra apple type thing. And but doing that taught me a lot. It taught me how to read labels, and it taught me to moderate. And if I wanted this thing, I could have it, but let's add in some healthy things to kind of offset it. And so it created a mentality around food that's just stayed with me since. And so quite often I don't I don't really have a lot of problems with my food, like how much food I'm eating and stuff like that, just because that kind of just stuck with me, like, oh yeah, I'm
Mhm.
gonna have this piece of cake, but I'm gonna eat some other healthy stuff later, you know.
Right.
So yeah. And so that really helped me. So things like that, how we
Yeah.
view it, how we view our food, how we view ourselves, how we view our place within the world, all of those things matter when it comes to this topic.
Mhm.
Yes, and this is an exhaustive topic, so we're going to leave it there. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Yep. Just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, other medical professionals, including nutritionists. This episode is on YouTube and most major podcast platforms. If you're not a subscriber, we'd love for you to be one. So don't forget to like and click the subscribe button on YouTube to keep up with our upcoming episodes. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as Behind the Mask PC. You can also email feedback and future episode ideas to us at behindthemaskpc@gmail.com. To find us, EJ, Lori, and T online, links for us will be in the description box. And on behalf of the ladies and myself, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye.